Hi everyone, I'm happy you joined me here today. And over the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about one of the most trending topics of our time podcasting. Hopefully, at the end of this presentation, you'll have the basic knowledge needed to launch your personal podcast. So, a few words about me to get started. My name is Michal Porat. I live in Israel, and for the past 15 years, I have been involved in content creation, social media, brand marketing, radio broadcasting, and of course, podcasting. On the left, you can see a photo from my military service as a broadcaster at the IDF radio in Israel. And on the right, a recent photo that was taken during one of the recordings of my latest podcast, Coming Out, which revolves around the coming out stories of Israeli LGBTQ plus people. And recently, I had a little dream come true, learning how to play the drums. And I have to say that learning how to play an instrument as an adult is an amazing experience, and I highly recommend it. So let's talk about the agenda for today. First of all, we're going to ask why podcasting, which is a good question to ask today. We're going to choose the right format for you, talk about the episode structure, the pilot episode, the interview preparation needed, and of course, gear and equipment. So now let's talk about the shift in content consumption. And first of all, as you all noticed, we turned from live to on demand, just like this presentation. People don't have to rely on schedules anymore to consume their favorite content. And it's all just a click away, right? Whether it's a show on Netflix or your podcast on Spotify. Just a click and you're there. And another thing that is worth mentioning is that we're not bound to content in our own area anymore. We can listen to podcasts and watch shows from different countries and cultures and expand our knowledge in any direction we want. So accessibility is an issue that I would like to address for a minute because it's a blessing as well as a curse. As a blessing, it allows us to create the podcast that we want, even from our iPhone or any other portable device. Not that I recommend recording your podcast from your iPhone, but people do that. So we can create a podcast about any subject in the world, even if we're not the most educated about the subject. And as a curse, it makes coming up with a genuine podcast idea way more difficult. Any content creator at the beginning of her way asks herself, what if everything has already been said? It's possible that this is true. But in my opinion, this doesn't need to stop you from creating your podcast. Which brings me to, this is your podcast, not anyone else's. You should have fun doing it, whether you are interviewing someone or just talking to a microphone. Make sure you are enjoying. Podcasting can take time and effort and energy and resources, so make sure you enjoy the process. So we're going to talk about 3 formats today. The first one is solo, just you and your content. The second one is co-hosting, you and a friend or a colleague, and interview/guest, you and a different guest anytime. So about solo podcasting, the pros are pretty obvious, but let's talk about them. You have your full creative control. You have complete autonomy over the content and direction of your podcast. The flexibility, no schedule conflicts or dependencies, which is great. And the deep connection that solo podcasting offers when it's just you and your audience and they get to know you. It's something that is irreplaceable. Talking about the cons is also important because having solo podcasts means that there is a limited perspective. And also hearing just your voice for a period of time, whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes, can be somewhat tiring. So make sure you address this issue as well. And I have 2 options for you if you are going for solo podcasting, things you need to consider. So the first is maybe trying to do shorter episodes to maintain an engagement and retention, and add some elements like audio clips, background music, and anything to make the episode more dynamic. So next off, we have the interview/guest. The pros for that is the diverse perspective that introduces a variety of voices and expertise to your audience. And also something that is worth mentioning is that once you bring a guest in, you'll have guests bringing their own followers and expanding your podcast reach. The cons, however, is scheduling may be challenging. You have to coordinate with someone else, and dependency. I mean, relying on guests for content may create gaps if they cancel or reschedule, which may happen. So a few things to consider. Preparation, research, we'll talk about that later on. Consistent schedule, plan interviews well in advance to maintain a regular publishing schedule, and maybe try bringing in another host, which can help keep the conversation going and adds perspective. So the third type of podcast that I'm going to talk about today is co-hosting. And the pros, obviously, is the engaging dynamics. The back and forth conversation can be entertaining and relatable. You have the shared responsibilities as opposed to solo podcasting. Not everything and every assignment is on you. And, of course, diverse perspective. Cons, on the other hand, just like I mentioned before, the coordination may be challenging and dynamic. This is something that we need to talk about because creating a good hosting dynamic takes time and practice, and you should take that into consideration. Some more things to consider. There is the roles and responsibilities shared between the two of you and episode planning. Now let's talk about the episode structure. A few things to consider. First of all is how long which episode should be. The opening, it will help you catch the listener's attention. The ending, will it be just a summary of the podcast? Will be some kind of a call to action? You need to think of that ahead. Specials, are you planning on recording special episodes? And research, see what other podcasts in your field are doing. So now let's talk about the pilot episode, which is the first episode you're going to record. Very exciting, I know. So I think the three most important things are honest beta listeners, self-feedback, and technical issues. So about the listeners, after recording the episode, make sure you're sending it to people you trust. You have to be willing to hear honest feedback that will sometimes bring you back to the drawing board. Self-feedback is also important when recording an episode. You should ask yourself questions like, is this how I imagined it? Am I enjoying doing this? Am I willing to make the effort to create a better episode? All of these are important questions to ask yourself. And lastly, something that you have to consider is technical issues. The balance of the audio between the hosts. Is the quality good enough? Are people listening in a busy environment will be able to hear what you're saying? These are all issues you should address. Interview preparation. This is an issue that can fill a 3-hour workshop or maybe a week-long workshop, but let's go through the fundamentals. So doing internet research can help you find the latest news about the guest and his recent quotes that may be relevant to the interview. A list of questions can help you organize the topics that you'd like to bring up, but please, please, please don't fall in love with it. That brings me to stay flexible. A conversation in its nature is a dynamic activity, so make sure you are able to stay dynamic and won't stick to a list of questions and topics. I think that the real magic happens in between what you planned. So actually for me, most people I interview are people who never interviewed on a podcast before. They may be nervous, so make sure to explain everything ahead and remind them and yourself, and this is important, that this is a recorded conversation, not a live broadcast. Also make sure to address the guest preferences, whether it's something that they don't want to talk about during the episode or what's their accurate title. And again, I've said it before, but I'll repeat it now. You're doing this for yourself. So invite the guest that you're interested in and ask the questions you desire to hear the answers to. Okay, so here are some options for equipment in 3 price levels. I have used all 3 types, so if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn with questions. The most common one for people recording their solo podcast is getting a USB microphone that requires no additional gear and is fully portable. Next is the Zoom-like recorder. Here is the Zoom H6, which I have and I use it on a regular basis. And there are also other brands that have similar products. This gives you good to very good audio quality and allows you to record up to 4 guests at a time. It does require additional gear like microphones and cables that you should buy. Lastly, and this is considered the Rolls-Royce of podcast equipment, it's the Rodecaster. I highly recommend it if you're always recording at the same place, and obviously if you can afford it because it's kind of pricey. So just like the Zoom recorder that I showed here, you'd need to purchase additional gear like microphones and cables. Okay, so to sum up this presentation, let's talk about your to-do list. So first of all, you need to choose the format, whether it's a solo podcast, a co-host, or just you and a guest. Choose the structure that fits you, prepare, do the research, gear up, and record a pilot. So this brings us to the end of the presentation, and I hope you learned something new and made a few steps toward launching your new podcast. Feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, and if you are a Hebrew speaker, then check out 2 of my podcasts listed here. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to hear what you come up with.